Please don't get there. And don't think that it's a disease, because it's not. It can happen to anyone. Do not look down on anyone, because at this time, and the way the world is going, it can happen to you too. If you can, use your judgment and do not judge. Thank you.
Homelessness in New York City is very hard. You have to be a seasoned individual to make it through these streets. Because if you're not seasoned, if you're not tough, if you don't have it in you to make it sleep in the streets at night, then the streets will eat you up immediately, and you will succumb to drugs. You'll be a drug addict. You'll be nothing but a drug addict, a prostitute. You'll be messed up in these streets. They will eat you alive. So you have to be strong. 3 wishes: a hot plate of food, a roof over my head, and a job.
You can travel to New York to see the Statue of Liberty shop on Fifth Avenue or check in at Times Square. But do you dare to walk a few blocks deeper where the brilliant lights fade and the stories often forgotten begin to emerge? Just behind the skyscrapers lies a very different New York.
Vic, this is what the recycle does for me.
A place where thousands sleep on park benches, huddle in subway tunnels, or live in makeshift tent communities. Here, soulless statistics become real people with once ordinary dreams to have a roof over their head, a place to call home.
You know, they said, they showed me the rules. You have to be 10 feet away from the driveway.
In this video, we will explore the dark side of the City of Lights and listen to the painful yet resilient stories of the homeless in New York in the year 2025 to understand that behind the light, there are always shadows that need to be seen. Number 1, New York. 2025. A dream shattered at the foot of Skyscrapers, New York. The city of opportunity of towers, reaching for the sky, and endless, dazzling lights. But in the year 2025, there's a figure that shocks the entire nation: more than 350,000 homeless people across New York State. Among them, each night about 132,000 people sleep in shelters, while thousands more, from the elderly and children to those who once had stable jobs, must find a place to sleep under bridges in subway cars or on the sidewalks of one of the world's most expensive cities. Manhattan, once the symbol of the American dream, now witnesses a heartbreaking paradox. The world's financial center is also where the density of the homeless population is highest in the city. From the famed Fifth Avenue, a short walk of just a few blocks takes you into another world: West 39th Street, Hell's Kitchen, or the area around Penn Station. Places once bustling with tourists have now become the reluctant refuge for those with no other choice. There, under the neon glow of sparkling billboards, are figures huddled in sleeping bags next to shopping carts filled with their belongings. They are not strangers. They might have been taxi drivers, waiters, construction workers, or even veterans. The most troubling question is why, in a city with a gross domestic product larger than many countries do, so many people lack a simple roof over their heads. The truth is, life in New York is becoming inaccessible to the very people who helped build it. Skyrocketing rent prices, soaring living costs, and an overwhelmed social support system that cannot keep up with the growing vulnerable population. Places that were once symbols of hope now serve as the backdrop for instability and loneliness. The story of New York is not just about one city. It is a mirror reflecting a reality that any major metropolis could face when the pace of development outstrips the capacity for compassion. It is the most vulnerable who are the first to be left behind. Number 2. The forgotten faces, past and present. Amidst the hurried crowds of Manhattan, there are people no one notices. Not because they are unimportant, but because they have been unintentionally erased by society. Yet behind the worn-out clothes and tired eyes lies a life that once had a name, a hope, and an aspiration. Jean Rice, born in 1939, was one of the most powerful voices for New York's homeless community. He was an ordinary worker living in Harlem before a series of personal setbacks pushed him to the streets. During nearly 30 years of homelessness, John not only struggled with hunger, cold, and isolation, but also witnessed the invisibilization that society imposed on people like him. Instead of accepting being forgotten, John stood up. He joined the organization Picture the Homeless and became a vocal social activist. John spoke before the New York City Council, demanding the right to housing respect and a voice for the homeless community. He passed away in 2023, but his legacy, an example of resilience and faith in change, lives on in the hearts of those who called him brother under the bridges of the Bronx. In contrast to John, Constance Woodson was a middle-aged woman who had worked hard her whole life only to fall into homelessness during the pandemic. When COVID-19 caused everything to shut down, her job disappeared. Despite being assigned as a contact tracer, a crucial role at the time, Constance couldn't fulfill her duties because she had no permanent address and no Wi-Fi at the shelter. Constance's story raises a painful question. How can we expect someone without a home, without a peaceful night's sleep, to continue contributing to the social system? Jean once had a home. Constance once had a job, but they, like thousands of others, were pushed into the abyss of invisibility. No one is born to be homeless. They were our neighbors, our colleagues, our community members. And the scariest part is not just that they lost their shelter, but that society stopped seeing them as human beings. They are not the problem. They are living proof of a flawed system. And from them, we learn that a civilized society must not forget its most vulnerable members. Number 3. The middle class. Just one crisis away from homelessness. In New York in 2025, the line between a stable life and homelessness has never been thinner. The middle class, once considered the backbone of society, now finds that a single setback can send them into a spiral of housing insecurity. Post-pandemic, the cost of living in New York has skyrocketed, rising from 75% to 90% in just a few years. A simple breakfast can cost nearly $20. A dozen eggs, $9, and a loaf of bread might be more expensive than an hour's wage for many. But the biggest shock comes from housing the rent. For a one-bedroom apartment in Manhattan has surpassed the $4,000 a month mark, pushing even those with decent incomes to the brink. According to federal recommendations, no one should spend more than 30% of their income on housing. Yet in New York, over 40% of residents are spending more than half their salary just to keep a roof over their heads. This creates a harsh reality even with a college degree. A 40-hour work week and no debt, just one small slip, like having your hours cut or receiving an emergency medical bill, is enough to wipe out all savings and push you onto the street. The story of Mark R., aged 36, is a clear example. Mark was an office worker at a midtown law firm with a stable income of $85,000 a year. He rented a small apartment on the Upper East Side, quiet enough for remote work. With no credit card debt and no student loans, Mark lived frugally, always setting aside money for emergencies. However, when his company downsized in late 2024, Mark was one of those laid off. 6 weeks later, an emergency surgery depleted his entire savings. His application for housing assistance was waitlisted with priority given to families with children. When his lease expired, Mark couldn't afford to renew and had to leave. Now, Mark works a temporary job at a coffee shop in Lower Manhattan, earning less than half his previous income. At night, he sleeps on a friend's couch. During the day, he wanders looking for more work. Mark shared that he never thought he would be in this situation. I did everything right. Got an education, worked hard, saved. and yet one crisis took it all away. Mark's story reflects a disturbing reality. The middle class in New York is no longer safe. When the cost of living outpaces wage growth, an unexpected event, something no one can avoid, can be the first step toward living on the streets. This is not just a personal tragedy. It is an alarm bell for the health of an entire city. Number 4. Shelter Subway Sidewalk. Nowhere is home. Amid the bustling pace and bright lights of New York, finding a place to sleep for the homeless is not just a matter of having a roof or not. It is a journey of uncertain survival. The city's shelters are almost always full. Although the government regularly announces plans to add temporary beds in winter, long lines of people still wait for their turn, sometimes for days. Inside conditions are harsh, crowded rooms, lack of privacy, and strict rules, like no outside food and mandatory departure every morning. For some, it is the last refuge. For many others, it feels like a prison without walls. With no space in the shelters, many turn to the subway system, one of the few places with light and some warmth for 24 hours a day. But in return, they risk theft, being chased away, or even danger. A man at the 34th Street station said he sleeps sitting up, clutching his backpack, because if you close your eyes for too long, you lose everything. For him, the subway is never home, just a temporary escape from the biting cold. Ironically, many choose to sleep outdoors on sidewalks, under bridges, just to maintain their freedom. No curfews, no need to leave every morning. But the price is cold wind rain and indifferent glances from passers-by. The choice between freedom and safety in this context is a choice with no good outcome. In contrast, in Helsinki, Finland, the concept of a shelter has almost disappeared. The city fully implements the Housing First model, providing long-term housing before requiring any other conditions. As a result, homelessness has decreased by over 35% in just a decade. When a home is treated as a fundamental right rather than a privilege, the vicious cycle of shelter, subway, sidewalk is broken. The question for New York is, when will it see a home as the foundation for a person to rebuild their life? Because when every refuge is temporary, the concept of home gradually disappears, and with it, the sense of belonging. Number 5. Immigration and an unseen social conflict. Over the past 2 years, New York has received over 175,000 migrants and asylum seekers, enough to populate several small city boroughs. They come from everywhere: Venezuela, Haiti, the Middle East, Africa, and even other U.S. states. Each brings a unique story, fleeing war, escaping poverty, or seeking a new beginning. But upon arriving in New York, many realize this promised land is not what they imagined. The support system, already strained for years, is now severely overloaded. Temporary shelters are full, and many places like gymnasiums and vacant hotels have been converted into emergency housing. The city spends billions of dollars on emergency housing, food, and medical services, but still cannot meet the demand. The result is endless waiting lists, where every spot of aid becomes a fierce competition. In this context, a quiet divide has formed between longtime residents and new arrivals. Many longtime New Yorkers, also struggling with soaring housing and food costs, feel that their place in an already deficient system is being taken. A single mother in the Bronx shared, "I've been waiting for housing assistance for over a year. Now newcomers are prioritized. I'm glad they're getting help. But what about us?" On the other hand, many immigrants feel alienated and marginalized. They speak of wary glances on the street, of being unable to get legal work due to lack of documents, and of nights spent sleeping outdoors when their temporary shelter stays expired. Both groups are vulnerable, yet they are pitted against each other like two small boats fighting for the same harbor in a great storm. Notably, this tension is not unique to New York. In Toronto, Canada, which also welcomes tens of thousands of immigrants annually, the government has partnered with nonprofits to implement a parallel integration model, creating temporary housing for newcomers while maintaining long-term support funds for low-income native residents. This approach helps reduce the feeling of competition and instead encourages community cooperation. New York, with its long history as the gateway to the world, faces a difficult choice: continue to let two vulnerable groups compete for limited resources or find a way to make room for everyone. Because if this underlying conflict is not resolved, the immigrant dream and the very spirit of humanity that once defined the city will continue to fade. Number 6. A tale of two cities' luxury and apathy. The elevator in a Manhattan skyscraper closes silently, carrying a group of well-dressed guests to the rooftop. They have just finished a dinner worth nearly $500 paired with a vintage French wine. At the same moment, just a few meters away at the entrance to the parking garage, an elderly woman wrapped in a worn blanket leans against the cold concrete wall, her eyes half closed to escape the headlights of passing taxis. Two worlds existing on top of each other, but never intersecting. New York, in 2025, is a living testament to the concept of visual inequality, where you can look up and see the sparkling lights of a rooftop bar, then look down and meet the tired gaze of someone sleeping in front of a convenience store. The irony is that both images have become normal to the city's residents. So familiar that no one stops to ask why. In the Soho or Upper East Side areas, luxury boutiques still display handbags and watches worth tens of thousands of dollars. Less than a 10-minute walk away at Penn Station or on West 39th Street, rows of makeshift tents stand close together, the smell of leftover food and rainwater mixing in the cold wind. In theory, the distance is just a few subway stops, but in reality, it is the distance between two parallel universes. The problem is not just about money, it is about mentality. When the image of homelessness appears too frequently, society becomes desensitized to their suffering. A person huddled on the sidewalk no longer evokes alarm or compassion, but is merely part of the urban landscape, like a lamppost or a traffic sign. This apathy is the most dangerous crack in the social fabric. Some sociologists call this moral blurring. When people convince themselves the problem is too big to fix, so it is best to ignore it. And when we look away, the gap between the two worlds deepens. While in Helsinki, Finland, the Housing First model has significantly reduced homelessness by providing housing before addressing other issues in New York, this solution remains tangled in budgets, bureaucracy, and the invisible barrier of indifference. Because to close a physical gap, you need money and policy. But to bridge an emotional one, you need a human touch, a glance, a greeting, or the simple acknowledgement that the people in that other world also have, outside of names, dreams, and the right to live with dignity. Number 7. Light in the darkness. Those who do not look away. As the clock nears midnight, New York shifts to a different rhythm. Times Square is still ablaze with lights, but a few blocks away, carts loaded with hot soup bread and warm blankets begin their journey. These are not delivery carts, but the mobile kitchens of a group of volunteers from the Bowery Mission who see the night as a time to bring warmth to the shivering souls on the streets. Michael, the group's leader, was homeless for over a year before finding help. Now he returns to the same old streets where he once sought shelter under awnings with a simple mission. I want them to know that someone still sees them and calls them by their name. Their steps pause at the entrance to Penn Station, where a few people are wrapped in thin blankets. Michael and his team sit down, not rushing to hand out food and leave, but to talk, to listen. Elena, the youngest volunteer, will never forget her first time. An old woman held my hand and said, "Thank you for talking to me like I'm a human being." That moment changed me. Tonight they walk through Hell's Kitchen West 39th Street and into alleys few dare to enter. Each time they meet someone, they do not just offer food or clothing. They connect them with shelters and arrange for emergency medical help when needed. Their patience has become a luxury in a city where the official support system is overloaded. They know they cannot erase injustice overnight, nor can they save everyone. But every question, every smile, every hot meal helps to preserve something precious, the belief that compassion has not vanished from this city. New York may continue to be a city of towering skyscrapers and glowing economic reports. But on the coldest nights on the sidewalks, few people notice small lights continue to burn. Not to illuminate the whole city, but to warm the hearts that were thought to be forgotten. Number 8. The lesson from Tokyo that New York is missing. As megacities with populations over 14 million people, Tokyo and New York seem similar in their bustling pace, dazzling lights, and roles as global financial and cultural hubs. But when it comes to the issue of homelessness, the picture is completely different. While New York in 2025 faces a figure of over 350,000 people without a permanent home, Tokyo, according to the latest statistics from the Japanese government, records only about 3,000 homeless individuals in the entire city. This disparity is not a miracle. It is the result of a completely different approach. In Tokyo, an early action policy is the golden rule. As soon as an individual or family is at risk of losing their home, the government steps in, immediately providing emergency grants for rent, referring them to low-cost public housing, or offering short-term loans. The goal is to stop the crisis at the starting line, rather than waiting until they are sleeping on the streets to intervene. Public housing in Tokyo is not the overcrowded and harsh temporary camps. They are designed to be clean and safe with low rent, giving tenants a chance to stabilize their lives. The system is maintained by public funds and transparent management, minimizing the delays and bureaucratic red tape that cause those in need to give up. What is also special is how Tokyo respects the dignity of those receiving aid. Services for people in difficulty are provided discreetly, avoiding public scrutiny. At food distribution points or medical aid stations, volunteers and social workers always use names and offer friendly greetings instead of treating them like a social burden. Some districts even organize vocational training or skills classes in welcoming spaces, helping participants feel like members of the community, not outsiders. Comparing the two cities, the stark difference lies not just in the statistics, but in the philosophy. Tokyo considers protecting the vulnerable an integral part of its urban operation, while New York is still struggling with high costs, slow policies, and a deep wealth gap. The lesson from Tokyo shows that the urban dream does not have to become a nightmare. With the right care, timely action, and respect for human dignity, a megacity can still shine brightly without leaving anyone behind. And perhaps this is what New York, and many other cities, need to realize to find a path toward change. A city cannot call itself civilized if it allows hundreds of thousands to sleep outdoors every night while taking pride in its skyscrapers. Every homeless person is not just a statistic, but a piece of this very society, carrying a past, a story, and a dignity that was once lost. When the poor, the elderly, children, and even the middle class are left behind, the crisis is no longer individual. It becomes a question of the community's conscience. New York can continue to be a symbol of the American dream, but only if that dream is wide enough not to exclude the vulnerable. The question that remains is, what will we do to stop this city from being a place where dreams come to an end, If you find this message thought-provoking, please press like and subscribe to the NVL Travel documentary channel to help spread the stories that truly need to be heard.